for Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Week. Dr. George, good to see you. I'll read this first, then you can go ahead and make some comments, all right?
Thank you.
All right. Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Week. Whereas the United States was founded upon the principle that all people are created with the unalienable right to freedom, and the 13th Amendment was added to the Constitution, making slavery illegal. And whereas slavery within the United States today is most often found in the form of forced labor and sex trafficking, which weakens our social fabric, increases violence and organized crime, and debases our humanity. And whereas this problem and heinous crime is found within our own community, and whereas the Iowa Network Against Human Trafficking has been working for 13 years to abolish all forms of human trafficking through education, volunteerism, advocacy, and collaboration, and whereas every business, community organization, faith community, family, and individual can make a difference by choosing products that are not made by forced labor, by working to protect our young people from sexual exploitation, by addressing the problem of internet sex trafficking and pornography, and by becoming more aware of the problem and possible solutions. Therefore, I, John A. Hala, Mayor of the City of Ames, do hereby proclaim the week of January 6th through 12th, 2019 as Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Week. And I encourage all of our citizens to become more familiar with the problem, to be vigilant and report suspicious activity, and to work towards solutions to end trafficking in all forms within our community. Dr. George?
Mayor. Happy New Year to all of the council members and our mayor and all of you here tonight. I want to thank the mayor and the city council for adopting this proclamation. I'm George Galitzis. I'm chair of the statewide Iowa Network Against Human Trafficking and Slavery. We are not a direct service organization, but we promote and help fund all of the agencies around the state, of which there are several nonprofits in our community here in Ames that are fighting human trafficking and providing direct services to victims and survivors of trafficking. I want to thank the mayor and the council for recognizing that human trafficking is a problem right here in Ames. And I want you to know that the network was formed, and it's the first statewide nonprofit dedicated to fighting human trafficking. And we're still, 13 years ago we were founded, we're still the only statewide agency exclusively fighting human trafficking. And we have no paid staff. We're all volunteers from across the state of Iowa. We have 20 people on the board that I chair, and they're from all parts of Iowa. We look forward to working with the council, with our police chief and law enforcement officers and agencies and concerned citizens to fight human trafficking in our own community and in our own state. I would like to add another thanks to the council for scheduling a city council workshop scheduled for Tuesday, April 16th, 6 p.m. right in this room, regarding the possible adoption of a local ordinance to regulate massage businesses here in Ames. We've asked for the last 2 years for the council to consider adopting a local ordinance to fight human trafficking and prostitution that goes sometimes under the guise of massage therapy right here in our own community. I want to give a special thanks to Mayor Hala for we had a 3-3 vote on having a workshop, and the mayor broke the tie. Thank you for doing that. It's very important to open this up for community input. I'd like to remind the council and the public that in May of 2016, we had 3 people arrested here in Ames, and 2 massage businesses closed. The 2 women who were charged with prostitution were rescued and actually never did do, were actually received services. The male that was arrested is serving time in prison, a felony for sexual assault. That happened in 2016. Then on May 10th, 2017, our network worked with the legislature to try to give local control to local cities so that they could oversee massage businesses. What we're really trying to do is restore the good name of massage therapy, because these illicit businesses that have cropped up not only in our own state but all across the country and the world are really doing a lot of damage, not only for public safety but to the victims and to the reputation of massage businesses. So we're really glad that the council is going to open this up for discussion here in our community. Lastly, I'd just like to mention that we've made a lot of progress in the last year and a half since the legislature gave us, on the local level, the right and responsibility to enforce regulations on massage businesses. And as of last week, we have 14 cities that have already adopted ordinances, including the 2 largest cities in Iowa, Cedar Rapids. They approved their ordinance in October, and 2 weeks ago, the city of Des Moines adopted its ordinance. Over 20 businesses have closed or moved out of town, and that is my great fear, is that these businesses quickly move to other places. They move their victims from city to city, state to state. They move their businesses. We're just down the road from several of these cities, and I think some of them may look at Ames as a friendly place to go and set up these illicit businesses under the guise of massage therapy, and where they don't fear enforcement. Again, I want to thank the council for taking some action, at least holding a hearing about this. If we could, at this point, ask anyone in the audience from local agencies fighting human trafficking, would you like to come up and take a photo with us? I know Access was coming. YSS. All right, it'll just be the mayor and I then. So we, Warren, would you take our photo?
He's there.
Come on, they call me. Just press out it.
Wow. Take one more.
Oh, we glad that.
Oh, I left a packet for every council member.
Before we get started, Councilman Garton handed me the newspaper. Just want to express on behalf of the council and the city our condolences to the family and to the law enforcement community in the loss of Scott Lindley. And we know that the police force, like the fire department, is a brotherhood, and we are grieving with you at this time and his loss. So. Okay, we'll move on to consent agenda. Council, item 11 has been pulled by staff, so it will not be part of the consent agenda. Does council prefer, want to pull any other items? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve.
Move consent.
Pardon, Mayor,
I'm sorry, go ahead, David.
could you pull item 5, please?
Item 5. Okay, anything else, David?
No.
Okay, all right. Motion to approve less item 5 and 11.
Move consent minus 5 and 11.
Second.
Roll call.
Ledger,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Burton,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Dee Hanson,
Aye.
Poirier,
Aye.
Okay, David?
On item 5, I'm just looking for the backstory on this. If it's on PDF page 24, this regards the engineering services for compliance contract. And it looks like the original contract was for $30,000. This change order is $10,000, but we've also accumulated $127,000 in changes so far already. And if you could just remind us what this is about and why it has this sort of dynamic in terms of changes over time?
I'm not sure if Don's here. I guess we'll have to give you a report on that. I'm just not prepared.
Okay.
He hasn't reported back on that yet.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, then I guess I would, unless there's something else to do, I would just move approval.
Is that a motion to approve? Is that a motion to approve, David?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, motion carried. David, you might want to maybe under council comments, bring that up about asking for a staff memo on that then.
Good idea. Thank you.
All right. Okay, move on to public forum. This is a time where people from the public can address council on any topic of city business other than those that are on the agenda. And so at this time, I'll declare public forum open, and we would ask that people limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. So is there anyone who wants to address council? And it's be helpful if you have an orange card with you to please give it to Amy. Thank you. And if you'd introduce yourself by name and address, please.
Hello, my name is Kiara Travisett. My address is 1239 Wisconsin Avenue. So I'm here as a representative of CAUSE, Citizens Actualizing and Understanding Sustainable Environments. We are a club at the high school that takes local climate action. On the week of December 3rd to the 8th, we hosted a signature drive, and in just those 5 days, we collected 613 signatures for the following petition. To the Ames City Council and the Ames Community School Board, we, the undersigned, want our elected officials to create a climate action plan for the Ames Community School District and the City of Ames. Climate change is an existential threat to our generation's future. On October 8th, 2018, the IPCC released a report that states that we may only have 12 years to reduce emissions by 45%, or climate change could be irreversible. Our elected officials have a responsibility to secure our generation's future, and thus we request the development of a comprehensive climate action plan and its implementation to reduce emissions. We hope that these 613 youth voices will encourage the City of Ames to consider taking a bolder stance on climate change. In the past few months, we've had several City Council members speak with CAUSE, and we've really appreciated their openness and the time they've taken out of their days to come speak with us. We hope to continue this relationship in the future. Also, if you look behind me, and if those of you who are here could stand up, we have several people, including students who signed the petition, that took time out of their evening to come show their support. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming. I think I speak on behalf of council. It does our hearts good to see high school students and other students get involved and come and address council and express their opinion. Thank you for doing that.
Orange card straight.
Good evening. I'm Merlin Fonkook, 1424 Kellogg Avenue in Ames. I want to talk again about economic development subsidies for industries. I'm concerned that if we don't sharpen our procedures, the taxpayers may pay dearly if the Eastern Industrial Area is successful. It kind of relates both to the establishment of the Eastern Industrial Area. You did that 3 years ago, or at least you appropriated money at the last minute in the budget for it. And I want to combine that with the Barilla example of February of 2017. I think we need to sharpen our procedures related to how we give subsidies. I was disappointed in your discussion of last month regarding increased transparency. I'm sorry that if I suggested something that set you down the path you went on, but you staff kind of set up a straw man and then you destroyed it. There's two parts to how I think you need to act and give the public the opportunity to act in such instances. You dealt only with notice last month. I guess I can live with the current procedure on notice because I guess I'm going to have to. But due process also requires an opportunity to be heard. And in the Barilla example of 2 years ago, I was very disappointed. It seemed to me that our city manager had committed the city to the most extensive package Barilla wanted. And even if you folks agree with that, the city manager's job is not to commit the city. That is your job. That's why we elected you. And how do I know this? Well, I noticed that there was no Barilla representative on hand. You know, if there's any doubt they're going to get what they want for $2 million extra in TIF, I think they would have sent a representative. It's my understanding that you ask applicants for new liquor license to come. So if there's questions for them, you can ask them. And here we had an instance of $2 million over our standard procedure, our standard industrial tax abatement, and there was nobody to speak for Barilla or ask questions. I would have really have liked to have heard them say in public that if they didn't get the most generous package, they would build at their New York site. It's one thing to maintain that position in private negotiations, but there's a little more pressure on you if you're forced to say that in public. And secondly, I thought the stuff about the possibly others could use in improve rail lines, I kind of thought that was malarkey. I would have liked to have heard about that. Anyway, I think you need to set some ground rules for what the city manager and staff can commit the city to. I'm worried because there's a lot of pressure now for economic development subsidies. Look at the East Industrial Area. You've committed $6 million of taxpayer money, or I guess maybe you haven't yet. Maybe you want to reconsider before you let the bids go. You know, is the environment still the same as it was 3 years ago? I don't know. That's not my area. But both the City Planning and Zoning Commission and its county counterpart voted about 2-1 against extending the infrastructure all the way to the DuPont plant. both the Board of Supervisors and you folks ignored that recommendation. You know, I'm thinking that maybe even our city manager would like some additional guidance. He's kind of hanging out there in the wind at the moment, trying to figure out what you folks will approve. You know, now I envision negotiations. You
Merlin.
have the Iowa, what is it
Merlin.
now?
Merlin,
Economic Development Authority there.
Merlin, your time is, I'm giving you a little more time to go ahead and wind your comments
Okay.
and stuff. If you please.
They're there. They haven't been noted for being frugal. There's a lot of criticism in the state about how generous our state incentives are. You're going to have the Dan Culhane there for the AEDC. You're possibly going to have an Alliant person there because they're involved in it. You're going to have the company representative, and then you're going to have Shanker or somebody from the city. That seems a little one-sided, particularly since our city manager sits on the executive committee of the Ames Economic Development Commission. There's too cozy a relationship there. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else like to address council tonight? Open forum?
Hello, my name's Jerry Neal, live at 916 Ridgewood Avenue. My remarks are brief. I'm here somewhat on behalf of the Ames Climate Action Team, of which I am becoming a part, an active part. And I am here to say thank you to Kara and her team because, wow, having these folks here, we need to listen to them because it's their world that they're coming into. There's a lot of really significant actions that we can all take. And I wanted to let them know that we're all excited about working with them. And I'd like to let you know that we're going to be making an effort to show up here at council and just talk about questions and issues around what do you do? Like, what do you do personally? What do you do policy-wise? What are other people doing? And so if you have questions that are kind of in your mind already about where would we go, what we do, what would this mean, please relay it to anybody on our team, Irv, Allison, or myself. We'll just kind of add that to the list and see if we can all work together on what we can do, both policy-wise and personal-wise within City of Ames to figure out how we take action on this really important issue. So upcoming is a comprehensive planning. And one of the things that we've talked about in our group, and I know it's been brought before you, is thinking about greenhouse gas mitigation plan for the city. That can come up in the comprehensive planning discussions, and I think that's a good place for that to show up policy-wise. Personal-wise, gosh, there's talks coming up at the Ames Public Library to talk about climate and action and what's going to be done, some video films that are coming up. Sun Smart Ames, we're trying to get that off the ground. That's a good personal action that can be taken. So there's a lot of places that everybody can kind of grab a hold and get a start right now, and that's what we would like to see happen. Get a little bit more energy and excitement around this, a little bit more greater sense of urgency. And thank you guys for stepping up. Appreciate that.
Anybody else? See, now we'll close public forum and move on to item 25.
Are you done with public forum?
Yes, I was waiting for someone to stand up or raise.
May I say one short brief comment?
Okay.
Okay.
Before I want to keep the meeting going and moving. So is there anybody else? Please raise your hand. Otherwise, she'll be the last speaker. Okay. Is there anybody else? Please, I want to keep the meeting going.
Yes, that's good.
All right. So it'll be you, and then we'll have one other person, and then we'll be done. All right. Thank you very much. Please
Okay.
give your card here to.
Yes.
My name is Allison Brunby. I live at 3125 Maplewood Road.
And I've never done this before, so I was a little nervous to step up and, trying to be polite too. But I'm here to urge the City of Ames to create a plan to reduce greenhouse gases and join with other cities that are doing this in Iowa, such as Des Moines, Fairfield, Dubuque, Iowa City, and other cities across the country. Many people see this effort as a moral and economic responsibility to mitigate the costs of climate change. Lots of people see this as an opportunity as well, and that it's a chance to have vision and to plan for a city's healthy and vibrant future. And I know you all care about that a lot. So Ames is a city full of engineers and planners and scientists. So I think that we are very well suited for any kind of, facing these challenges and looking at what can we do for resiliency planning and mitigation together. They can often go together. And so I ask for your leadership to budget the funds, the work hours, the commitment, and the community engagement that I think is necessary in what scientists tell us is this critical window for our future.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just second her remarks.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, we will close public forum, move on to item 25, Campus and Community Commission.
Okay. So, okay.
Apologies, we have one new person
Hi,
joining us. Hello.
commission members, welcome.
So we submitted a report on our latest task of helping the community be more inclusive. And you've had that, I hope, for a little while. So I definitely am not going to read the whole thing, but we are available for questions or comments from you guys.
Okay. Council?
I was somewhat surprised by the scope because I thought that we had left the discussion talking more about the maybe kinds of events or something that we could plan. And so when I saw the report, I thought, oh, well, this sounds more like inclusivity as in diversity and inclusion as opposed to welcoming and inclusivity. And maybe that's because the principles of community at Iowa State are coming out of the diversity office and have been promoted as that. But it somewhat surprised me. And so I thought, maybe we were really waffly. And I went back and I reviewed the video and we were really waffly on what we asked you to do. And so, my take on it was, I completely agree that we need to have some kind of branded campaign that organizes these events that we've got going on under one umbrella of some sort. But that's something that we keep talking about and we don't do. And even if we do organize the events under that umbrella, does it change anything? I don't know, because it seems like we can brand it, but if it doesn't really change anything, then I don't know if it if it works. My second thought was, I've seen the principles of community from Iowa State on numerous occasions now, and I think it's a really good endeavor for Iowa State. But when I read those principles of community, I almost wonder whether they are dividing the community writ large, because Ames doesn't get mentioned at all. It's all about the university and a focus on students as part of the campus community. And I've seen other principles of community. Colorado State is one that I'm familiar with, and they mention, local community, state community, national community, global community, and Iowa State's principles talk about the university. And so I'm wondering if there's a means for us to change Iowa State's approach to bring that closer to us. And I don't know that that's necessarily something that the commission does. That may be something that we engage in discussions about. But it hadn't really struck me until seeing them in this context, how university focused those principles are. Because I've seen them a lot, and I just never really thought about the fact that Ames is not mentioned at all. And the city or the neighborhood or any of that generic kind of language for community isn't mentioned. It's all about university. So I like the idea of having some sort of unifying principles, but I don't think the principles as they are currently written are really serving the purpose of getting the students welcomed into the community and integrated. And I honestly don't know how those got written. Pete, maybe you know the history of where they came from?
Yeah, I'm happy to give a little background, and I think your point's well taken. Some of you may recall in mid-2000s, University engaged Sue Rankin to come in and do a campus climate survey. And as a result of that initial survey, that's when a group of people got together and developed the first set of principles. And I think that they had some life at the institution for 4 or 5 years, and then they did not receive any emphasis. And we've recently re-emphasized that based on assessment of the university community, not the Ames community, about the challenges that we're experiencing between student, staff, and faculty, between and among. And said, so we need some guiding principles on how we want to interact. The home in terms of where their reference on our website is diversity inclusion in Dr. Stewart's office, they're embraced in every unit and every program and every department, as they should be at Iowa State. They were on lanyards that all 11,000 students who came to Iowa State moved in, explained the 6 principles. I will tell you that within the on-campus community, our bias incidents are down tremendously by our poster campaigns, the video that was shared during Destination Iowa State and Hilton Coliseum. For those of you that attended, there was one that explained how we interacted and worked together. And as we conversed about it, we thought that concept could be expanded. And we also, as we evaluated a number of events that were taking place and conversations even with mayor, city council, president, university, there's momentum around this. And as we listened and learned more about that, saying, sounds like there's a lot of good things in place, and here's some ways in which we can kind of build on that. And that's where the report came from.
So those are my first 2 points. The third point, I guess, is that I left that meeting thinking we were going to get some kind of recommendation for, I don't know, a signature Ames event based on the analysis of what Tashik Kher pulled together, and didn't see that in the report. So what happened with that part of the discussion?
So I think basically every time we started talking about it and came up with something we wanted to do, someone said, oh, that sounds almost exactly like what the chamber is doing or what someone else is doing. So we did sort of feel like a lot of those things were already happening, and we didn't know if we should spend time duplicating things. Instead sort of started focusing on how we could tie things together, or maybe sort of complement what other people are doing, as opposed to separating who can go to things. that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. And I completely agree that we've got all these different events going on, and there really is a lot of material already out there that if it were brought together under the same brand, does a lot. The one thing that's missing in what I see is that we have a lot of events that are sort of the open house nature. You know, we put on an event and we say, students are welcome. Come on over, you know, come to the Welcome Fest, come to Campus Town. And we don't bring anything to the students. It's more like we create an opportunity and then we wait and see if anybody shows up. And I don't think we've had a particularly high percentage of people showing up. I mean, Welcome Fest always has a lot of folks at it, but when you think about how large the sunroom is, and then you consider the size of the student body, I don't think we're reaching that many students. And so is there a way that we can take it to the students instead of asking the students to come to an open house like event? I know I'm seeing that there's a nameplate there for Sandeep Stanley. And I know that when we met with the student government last fall, he was talking about, I don't know, an I Love Ames Day or something like that, which is more the kind of event which we don't really have. And we've got these smaller things, but we don't have a big opportunity to engage with a lot of students. And I had told him that I was going to try and get him access to a webinar that we did for the University Communities Council for the National League of Cities, which focused on what Columbus and the Ohio State University has done. And it's remarkably similar to the kind of thing that he was talking about when we met with student government, but it's more of almost an enforced welcome. In other words, something that's part of orientation. They have it at the stadium, and all the students involved in orientation are brought to the event. And so they're taken to the event. It's not just, we're having this thing, come on over if you want to, but they're brought there and then they're entertained and they're also informed and they're welcomed in a kind of festive way. And so when I say, you know, bring the event to the students, doesn't have to be necessarily people going out to students, which is one of the models that a lot of communities use. It could be, how do you get all of those students or a bunch of the new students to an event in some sort of organized way that isn't just, we're having the event, please come. So those are my thoughts upon reading the report.
And one of the areas that we talked about, and I believe early in some of the Destination Iowa State programs where we have 5,000 new to ISU freshman students in Hilton Coliseum, as a mayor was part of the program. So, you know, I think you describe a circumstance that any of us work with Iowa State students, you know, how can you get all 35,000 together at one time, or how you can get 31,000 undergraduates together at one time? The reality is, so when you welcome new students and it's their first experience at Iowa State, and you create this foundation that you hope that it just keeps building over the years that they're here. And that's what we focus on Destination Iowa State with, those 5,000 freshmen, you know, and 93.7% live on campus, and our CAs bring them to the event. And that's where we share the Principles of Community video, and I will share. It's had an impact because we can reference back, and that group goes, they remember that. It was on shirts that they got, and the staff wore, and lanyards and other things. So there are messages that we've learned some communities share where the students see themselves as part of Ames, and it changes some of the behaviors that they engage in. And so there are opportunities to continue this dialogue, not just on adopting principles or modifying principles, but also the way in which we deliver a message that you know, that they're important to the entire community. That's as close as I think you're going to get to try and do something outside of that. I will tell you, there's a lot of time, energy, and resources taken just to get that one event to take place the way it does, and it's very successful.
Well, I wonder, having been part of the webinar where Ohio State was talking about what they've done, whether there's the potential to expand the role of the city in that event. I mean, if the event's already happening, the question is how much of it is Iowa State and how much of it is get to know Ames. And that's the part that I think we're concerned about. How do you get the students to know Ames and to feel like they're a part of Ames? And I love the fact that it's been successful. I've seen the video and I think it's a great video. But again, it's about Iowa State. And so is there a way that we can do something to build on that? You know, don't recreate it, but make some recommendation for how we can capitalize on what already exists and what already seems to be successful. One of the things that Ohio State does is simply make it possible by doing it in their stadium to have vendors and information booths from around the community at the event. So you have whatever the program is, and then you've also got the opportunity for mingling and getting information, meeting some of the business owners, getting information from the city or other organizations. You know, so it's just more integrated city and university as opposed to just university. And I think it started there as mostly university, and then the city got integrated into it, and they've done it now for a number of years very successfully. But I don't know. I mean, those are my thoughts as I was reading the report.
Council members, thoughts?
Well, the third question was sort of whether or not to give this topic more time or to move on to another topic. And I'm not sure I got a sense from your report. What's your sense on that? Do you want more time on this topic? You're like, no. Next one.
So I think if you want us to spend more time on this, we would like more direction as to what specifically. So if, as Gloria is saying, we want you to either find a way to partner with an event or come up with your own event to have, then that would be very specific and we could meet about it. We would meet and, you know, it was sort of all over the place. It just almost felt overwhelming. And so I think either this is good for now and you have some things you want us to work on, or you give us more direction.
Sure. Thank you.
But your consensus is that another event is not necessarily the best idea.
Maybe to partner with an existing one if we're gonna.
Or expand on something that's already happening.
Yes.
So would it be enough direction if I were to move that the commission make recommendations on how the city can effectively work with the university to expand the efforts that have now been put in place by the university to include city welcome, city information, city as part of principles of community, you know, those things that already exist. But if we just expanded them a little bit, we may end up with the kind of impact we need. Is that enough direction? That's what I'm asking you.
What impact are you looking for? That they understand the city better, or what the city has to offer, or just what, I'm not talking government, but city of Ames in general when it comes to businesses, services, that type of thing, or what the city government also has to offer?
Yes.
I mean, all that. Okay.
I think that's one of the successful things about what Columbus has done, because they have done information about the community writ large, not just
would you mind sending over a link or something?
I'm trying to make it available. I still haven't managed to get it to Sandeep either. It's as soon as I do, I will send it.
it's in my former role as a university administrator around when that program got started. The challenge of all of these is a limited amount of time and what is the content. And I know the university has struggled to figure out how you can do that in that particular framework for the number of hours you get those students together. My own reaction to your comments is that if you feel that's something you want to be engaged with, I'm not sure the commission is the best body to get that done. That's something that perhaps your city administrative staff and the university administration need to talk about. Because at the end of the day, there is a time period, and I know the university has struggled with sort of making the program content fit within the amount of time. And, when you talk about expanding and adding, I don't know that that's a commission. I don't know if the commission's the best entity to really carry that forward. Speed's one of the people. I think that's kind of an administrative thing. You need to move into that framework if that's what the council believes would help the community.
I just jumped on the website just to verify what my recollection was for the commission's charge. Excuse me. And it does say that to offer recommendations to the council regarding issues brought forward as common interests, and then upon council approval, investigate the issues. But it's not really execution. So that would support exactly what Mr. Madden is saying. And I will say that after our meeting with student government, Iowa State student government, Senator Stanley and I met for about an hour and a half, and I think there's an awful lot of energy and there's a lot of passion on student government right now to try and really help the students become more engaged in the community. So I don't want to, we had a wild brainstorming session, and he said he was going to probably come back after, this spring semester, have more conversation, but there's some initiative on even student government. But the question is for council, is that really the commission's role to do that?
Right.
Or is it more or less saying, we received the report, thank you, do you have any other suggestions, and then basically find someone to start moving it forward or not? Just because my sense from from what it says here on the website, is it's more an idea think tank and just kind of versus really what the next step is essentially.
Well, and maybe that answer that Warren just gave is the report that I need, which is the way this works. We don't have enough time in the day or the number of hours to do that kind of expansion on the event. And, if that's the answer, that's fine. Because I do think that we can take it and do something with it. Then the question becomes, what's the next charge? And that moves us to something like, parking or Rent Smart Ames. I saw all of those mentioned as issues that kind of circle around this feeling welcome question. Did you have any sense of what rose to the top among those other concerns in your discussions?
Well, I know, I'm sorry, Karen, you want to go ahead? I know some of the students in our meetings had talked about the rental side of things and working with landlords. That's what I remember was kind of the theme I was hearing. And so am I crazy or is that sound right? I guess not.
Is that regarding a lease gap issue?
I think lease gap issues, I think all three student governments at Regents institutions have been exploring a web-based solution around rentals and how to, be good tenants and also then if they have issues, how do they get resolution? Even they've raised a specter of being able to publish concerns they might have around their housing circumstance. And what I shared with them when we used to have an off-campus and adult student services office in the early 2000s, we also gave landlords an opportunity to respond. Now, and that was in a 3-ring binder in the Memorial Union. And so with today's technology, we could certainly do this a lot differently. And there's actually a lot of vendors that would like to provide that kind of service for free, but then they would to students, but to other folks, if you want to list your properties or advertise to students, then you would pay in order to get that. That's how they make money off of these. But the students have been interested in saying, how do we create some kind of a conversation point so that we can dialogue about what we're experiencing in our student housing, and also for maybe landlords to have the opportunity to respond that way. And they still are talking about that. What I indicated is, if you're going to do this, you should not just take the first phone call that you received and you like the ideas, to do an RFP process, and then look for a home for that. The Rent Smart Ames offers a lot of the same kinds of things, but the landlords aren't driven to use it. And so I think what the students are saying, they just wanted a venue to be able to talk about what their experiences were in the rental market, and then also to potentially seek options as they look for housing and how to do it well. So I think what Erica described is a possibility. Then I would look to us to partner with student government.
Is that different enough from what has been done in the past with Rent Smart Ames?
I believe what they want to do is create some kind of currency for students. And if they're going to go in and say, Department of Residence on-campus housing, here's my concerns about, I've had with them, and then it's my job to respond, and we're in that space, along with, I can list properties.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge we deal with Rent Smart Ames is no one's interested in using it because the properties aren't being listed there. So it's a great tool, but what will happen is a student could say proximity, $500 a month, utilities included. They can do sorts, and there really isn't a lot of motivation for a landlord to put their properties up there unless they're very small and they don't have their own way to in a web-based way, make their property known to students. The process they currently use is they'll drive them to their own private website. Come look at the one at the Union, or look at our properties that we currently have. And your job is to see it maybe in the Daily or in some other way, a video board at a football game, and you'll go in and explore that then. But you're not going to be able to put 4 properties and compare them across, which is what Rent Smart Ames allows you to do.
Do you have any sense of whether that's also part of the larger concern of student government? When we had their meeting with them, at least one senator, Senator Sanchez, was talking about developing means to communicate between the students and the city. And it seems like this is another one of those communication issues, that communicating about landlords or about rental properties and about your experiences with them. I wonder if there's a question of how do we develop an effective means of providing for interchange on issues that the commission would be useful for, and also issues that are of concern, which is what the commission's topic is.
I sense a little bit of either floundering or lack of direction tonight. I'm wondering if one option would be is, we're scheduling to go back and revisit, goals, update those here in the next few weeks or within the next, month. If council could, amongst ourselves, and certainly it's an open meeting, so public can come, but it won't be in public input, is evaluated as something that we can give some direction to, the commission to move forward versus trying to just, hash over things tonight. I'm not sensing there's really any specific direction we have to give to them. I think that they are entitled to specific direction so they can be, on point and move forward. Unless any of you have some suggestions or things that just really kind of comes out. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm the new GPSS liaison.
Could you sit a little closer to the mic or, yeah, thank you.
I guess like this is my first meeting that I've been to, but it seems like there are different, I guess, I don't know, levels of outreach that we're looking for. Like there's community belonging, but also logistical ways to help connect students to the community. And I guess like it definitely seems like that the methods need to match the level of organization that it takes the individual to do. So for like rental issues, like it would be nice to have like a representative at whatever event, but I definitely think that like more written like venues of media would be more effective. Whereas like if we're going to do something more broad as like community belonging and more like person to person, and it seems like it's all kind of being clumped into one. So maybe like if we like delineate like what, I guess, what area of their life we want to emphasize, being like cultural, work, I don't know, study, I don't know.
So Gloria, the one thing I was going to say to your point was we do have a public forum at our meetings, and I don't know if that's something that, perhaps if we publish that, or not publish, that's not the word I want, publicize it so that people would know, students included, that that is a place that they could come and bring up an issue that they would like to, have help with. Maybe that's a way for them to have a place to do that, that we would get some of that communication and then be able to, bring it forward to you or roll it into one of these other things that we're working on. Just a suggestion.
I think ideally that's what we were hoping would happen, although the student representation is also very important in getting students to know about the public forum or to provide information to student representatives so they can bring things to the commission. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's go ahead and either give some direction to the commission or thank them for their report, and then indicate that we can give them some additional feedback, maybe through a written form, either through Brian Phillips, and continue moving on this evening, unless I want to cut people short, but I'm not sensing there's a whole lot, and I don't want to necessarily prolong the conversation if we're just going to go in circles.
Can I just go back to parking, which was the other outstanding issue? Did that surface much in your discussion?
I think it surfaces in any discussion that we have about campus or campus town or students. But there are many different aspects of parking also. So even if you said you wanted us to work on parking, it would have to be, specifically the ordinances that differ between neighborhood to neighborhood, or the parking in campus town, or something a little more specific than just parking.
Yeah, or you could also have us with, like, if you say parking or renting, we could have a focus group, right? We can put together a focus group with the people that we need to come up with some direction and report back to.
Any other questions?
So we'll just leave them directionless?
Bobby?
We're just going to leave them directionless until our
Just
goal setting
temporarily.
session, and then we'll come back. Okay.
Well, that's, yeah, I'm not trying to cut anybody off, but if no one really has specific direction, it just seems to me to be unfair to the commission to ask them to go ahead and just.
Yeah, no, no arguments here, but do we need to set a date for them, or we'll just revisit it? Do we need to move to put it on a future agenda, do you think?
The other thing, though, that we have not done, we've given you waffly direction. We've been very successful at giving you waffly direction. But the one thing that we have not done is had the commission discuss what they think might be relevant concerns and bring it to us. And that was another part of the charge. And so maybe in this intervening time, while we're working on our goal setting at whatever your next meeting is, you could discuss what the issues are that your constituencies see as of concern to the community and the university, and the students and business community residents, whatever, and come back to us with those kinds of concerns.
Well, I think my understanding was the list at the bottom of the memo here. Those ideas came from an initial brainstorming session where we did come to council with a number of items.
Right.
And so I don't know that we're going to find different items if we went back to have this discussion again.
Okay. But you've got a couple of new members, right? Yeah. And times have changed a bit since you were formed. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of how your time might be used.
Well, that's a fairly recent list. Those 4 on the bottom of the memo.
Well, the last time we met with you was in March of last year, and those predated that. So it's been, what, 2 years? Year and a half?
Year and a half. I think these did come from the initial brainstorming.
I do think, though, that in the latest report/letter that we submitted, there are several things listed. And I'm not saying we can't meet and talk and hear from our new members. We can certainly do that. I think all of us feel like at every one of our meetings since our last charge, we talked about, do we just need to go back to council and get more information? So I think all of us would feel better if we got more specific direction from you as to what you wanted to see.
Then I guess I would move that we wait until after our goal setting session and then provide specific direction to the commission.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstain? Those are abstaining? All right. Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you for your time, and we will be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, move on to item number 26, staff report regarding Human Service Capital Grant Program funding. Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. So in 2017, the City Council initiated the creation of a Human Services Capital Grant Program, and the council set aside a capital improvement program of $500,000 for this purpose. $300,000 of that came from the general fund balance, and $200,000 was set aside from the local option sales tax balance. And when the council established the actual program, we worked together with United Way of Story County to administer the program, utilizing a lot of the systems and processes that had been set up for similar programs for United Way of Story County. And the city council authorized $250,000 of the $500,000 for that purpose. And all of that came from the general fund portion of what the council had originally allocated in the budget. United Way of Story County took applications for capital projects that met the criteria that the city council had set up with the creation of the program. And a number of those projects were funded. United Way administered the funding to those agencies to complete their projects, and then delivered a report to the City Council in the June 1st City Council packets. There is a balance of the unused funds, the remaining $250,000 that was not authorized to be used, which is split between general fund balance and local option sales tax fund balance. Those funds, if the council chose to do nothing, would just go back to the fund balances and could be allocated towards other activities that meet the purposes of those particular funds. So at this point, the City Council has asked for a discussion about this topic so that you can provide further direction if you desire. I do want to point out, Just a big note of thanks to United Way of Story County for partnering with us on this project. That was a tremendous help in getting the dollars from these fund balances or this fund balance into the agency's hands and turning that into projects that actually make an impact. This would have been significantly more challenging if we had to create a program from scratch. And so it was, again, very helpful for United Way to partner with us on that. I believe Jean Cressy from United Way of Story County is in the gallery, and she told me she'd be willing to take questions. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have and take any further direction that you have regarding this project.
I have a question about the projects that were funded through this, through the first round. And maybe Jean would know off the top of her head, or any information on, have they all been completed? There's a report they need to fill out and things like that. But how is it tracked? Whether they complete the projects or not. And
So it was a 3-step process as far as getting the money out. One was the letter of intent. And then those agencies were invited that the allocations committee deemed appropriate to submit a full proposal. And then the full proposals were reviewed by the allocations committee and then went to the full board and then were approved. From there, we have a grant agreement that agencies had to sign. So that delayed it a little bit. But once those grant agreements came back, then the funds were submitted to the agencies. So we had 5 grants. So what we do normally for our process is a 6-month follow-up grant update. And because some of the projects, well, all the projects were somewhat capital, not all of them were done in 6 months. So the status that I shared with Steve today was the Child Serve Playground. They did spend the money and they are in the process. There are some finishing touches that they need to do yet this spring because of weather, et cetera. And that's an all-inclusive playground on site. The other one was emergency residence project, which was air conditioning for their units. That was one of those, you purchase, you put it in and it's over with and it's done, and everybody was cool this summer. So they appreciated that. The other was the HVAC system for ACPC, the Ames Community Preschool Center. And they submitted a grant progress report and they are 99.9% complete. So just making sure that that environment is safe for all staff and children as well.
I pass those on to you this afternoon when I receive.
Oh.
So we
you?
received,
I didn't see
and then YSS is Rosedale Shelter, and they're doing a complete first floor remodel in order to have site supervision, but also be a little bit the space, if you've been in Rosedale Shelter, to make sure that the space is utilized in the best possible way. And they probably, I talked to Belinda Meese today, and they will probably be concluded by the end of January, early February, and will submit their progress report at that time.
It's us. Mainstream.
Oh, Mainstream.
And Mainstream, dear Amber Corrieri, Bill Vaughn actually wrote the application, so I did not have a chance to talk to him, but I know that they were doing significant remodels to the house, and whether or not that's completed or not, I don't know, but.
People are moving in.
Pardon me?
People are moving in.
People are moving in, so we should be getting that progress report fairly soon.
Thank you.
The grants that we did receive, though, the $250,000 was truly appreciated by all the agencies. I think we were just shy of about $60,000 in requests that we were not able to fund.
Jean, with the timeline that we had, I'm not sure where the timeline came from. I'm guessing this is United Way's timeline?
Yes and no. The timeline was that we had to expend the funds by the end of June. And so we back it up because of the LOI, the letter of intent process. We want to make sure that agencies have enough time to submit their initial idea of what their project was. And then we did give them longer to actually complete the full application. Keep in mind too that if receiving 5 grants and awarding 5 grants was pretty significant. But if you recall, there was a cash match requirement, and that precluded a lot of agencies from participating because they simply don't have that cash match.
So the reason I asked about the deadline is because at this point, if we were to say, yes, we want to go ahead with funding for the upcoming year, could that actually work effectively if the deadline is April 20th? Is that enough advance notice for
When you
people?
say for this current year, I would, for this fiscal year that we're currently in.
No, sorry, for 1920.
We could do any timeline for 1920.
Okay.
Right. If you, I mean, we could be ready to hit the ground running July 1 with the LOI.
Yeah. Good.
Other questions for Gene or Brian?
Brian, maybe you could just give us a little bit of background. We received a half dozen emails from people that expressed concern that perhaps we might not go forward with funding this. And I thought it might be helpful if you could just give us a couple sentences about the broader level of support that we give human services in terms of the asset funding. Can you give us a sense of what we're spending as a city in asset?
Sure. If you turn to the last page in this staff report, it's a revised version of the local option sales tax fund summary that you saw at the budget guidelines session. So at that session, you saw a version of this that included different options for funding levels that you might pursue for asset quota, outside funding requests, and so forth. This version has been updated with the approved authority that the direction that you as the council gave us at that session. And so if all of those funds were expended as you've authorized them, then this is what that funding would look like. And so for 1920, the city council has authorized $1,466,202 for asset agency funding. Now that funding is a little bit different than the funding in this particular program we're talking about. Asset agency funding is funding that pays for services, right? So it is paid on a reimbursement basis based on the rate per unit of service that is arranged across all of the asset funders. Asset generally doesn't provide funding for capital improvements. If agencies wanted to pursue funding through asset for that, they would need to increase their cost per unit of service and save money for capital projects, basically is the approach there. But asset doesn't have a mechanism to do specific capital improvements.
And I appreciate that. I think it's helpful as we think about this one particular aspect of the city's contribution to helping our most vulnerable citizens, that we think about this in light of the broader context of what we're doing through asset. And this last year, we gave a 3% increase in funding. Brian, could you talk about the viability? I mean, the capital grant program was my recollection was a pilot project. And I'm concerned about being able to continue to fund asset, providing these cost of living, these increases over time, and yet maintain this grant program. I worry about the viability of the grant program in light of what we're doing with asset. Could you speak to that issue?
Well, the discussion that we had at the budget guidelines session was that for a number of the previous years, the authorized increases to asset in particular, but also to some of the other pots of money that are authorized out of local option sales tax fund, were increasing at a rate faster than the growth in the local option sales tax fund was occurring. And so it's a finite pot of money. And so the council has to prioritize what that funding is to go towards. So if we're increasing the proportion of that funding that is asset, that means that there are other activities within that pot of money that will receive a smaller proportion. It may overall increase, but it might not increase as much for those services. So that was the discussion that we had. It's all a balancing act to ensure that we will continue to be able to provide increases. I think that is a goal of the council, to be able to provide increases and not eventually get to a point where we are flat funding because we don't have the growth to sustain continued increases.
So this is exactly my concern. I worry that we're going to be at a place, and we can almost chart it out depending on what happens with, so for those who are watching, the U.S. Supreme Court case that says that Amazon and other internet sales providers have to give us money back. We don't know what's going to happen to local option sales tax fund. But I am concerned that if this pot stays relatively the same or doesn't grow fast enough, at some point, our mechanism for funding social services is not going to work any longer. And so I don't see that as, I mean, at some point, some council, whether it's us or someone else, is going to have a hard conversation about the model of asset funding. If I have to choose, I would prioritize funding the services at this point rather than the capital. I think it's important when you look at the kind of frontline services that we're funding through asset, I'm going to prioritize those. If we had an infinite pot of money, I'd say, nah, no problem. Let's double what we're giving in capital grants. But that's not the reality of our funds right now. So that's a concern I have, and but it's important for people who are paying attention, who genuinely care about human services. This is not a matter of saying as a statement, we don't value human services. It's a question of prioritizing limited resources.
I would say that when we came up with the program, it was designed as a multi-year pilot, right? So we authorized the 250, but then we retained the other to see what would happen, see if it was successful, if there was a need, et cetera. So in my mind, it's not out of line with what we directed earlier to release the second 250,000. I'm not saying I know the future of this program, but we had already sort of earmarked it, and we've seen that there's a need. I think the letter describing the projects and the capital grants that were awarded shows that there was a need and the funding went to good purpose. I think we're in a good position to do the second round now of the 250,000 because of the release of online sales tax. I mean, our sales tax fund balance is going to get slightly better. I mean, it's optimistic right now. And so it's a good time, I think, to use this funding on capital because, the future is uncertain. We don't know, 5-10 years down the road what sales tax balances will look like, but we know right now it's hopeful with that increase in online sales tax. And so I would encourage us to go ahead with the second round of the 250,000, see where it puts us, and then we can reevaluate at that time.
But if we, as the staff report points out, if we do that, that reduces this fund balance to $250,388. And just because we have it doesn't mean therefore we should spend it. And I don't doubt anything you're saying. There's no question there are some who will apply, but I'm reluctant to bring our balance down to that low of a point.
Well, I mean, I guess, like I said, it was already earmarked for this purpose. It was our intent to see how year one would go. If it was successful, that we would do it again. I mean, if not, we would have just allocated 250 the first go round, but we didn't. We said 500,000, and I think it's an okay time to release the other 250 and then see where that leaves us. I guess, yeah. I understand where you're coming from, though, and in wanting to be responsible with our funding, because you're right. We do have to make decisions about where we spend money. Yeah, no argument there.
Okay, I'm going to open up public comment. Is anyone in the audience who'd like to address council on this particular topic? And if so, you're invited to come to the podium. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Any other questions for Brian or Gene? If not,
I guess I do have one question for
Sure.
Gene. Sorry. We had a pretty decent idea of the demand for this grant program when we went through the first round of funding. Do you have any sort of feel for what might be coming down the pipe for projects that could be funded through this grant program?
Off the top of my head, I can't come up with one in particular. I know that we did not fund all of Mainstream's request. I know that they've got some additional things that they would like to do. Since the grant was released, YSS did lose 712 House to fire, so I'm sure that there might be something down the pike for that. I know that ERP, Emergency Residence Project, is always looking at how can they provide additional shelter or transitional living space for their clients. And I know Access, when they had changed their model from a shelter unit to scattered sites, they did purchase some townhomes. So there might be that avenue down the road. And of course, Friendship Arc just completed their 5th home last spring and are doing some adaptations to their other 4 homes as well. So I think that you're all correct and that the need is still out there. The question that we would still have is, would those agencies that I just mentioned be able to come up with the required match? So if you want to move forward with another round, you would need to make sure that if that's what your intention is, I would suggest waiting to see what the grants come back as before you would actually physically release the money to any organization, not assuming it would be United Way, because that might get sticky having to pay it back.
So one of the things I like about what you just said is you mentioned a whole bunch of organizations that we did not fund last time. So
Right.
it appears that there's a demand across a broader section of the community that we aren't going to, not that the groups that we funded are not deserving of grants this time around, but you just hate to see the same 3 or 4 groups being funded every year with that program. So
Yes, and that's a good point. But when you think about who some of those grants are that were funded, and I say this with the utmost respect, Mainstream and Child Serve and YSS, they have an operating budget that is much greater than the other agencies combined. So they have at least an avenue of coming up with that match money, or at least they have a donor history and a history of raising funds from donors to come up with that match. So,
And a staff that
and a beautiful, wonderful
can
staff that
provide resources to writing grants and managing
Right,
grants.
writing grants and
And
managing grants.
not all agencies have that.
That's true.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think there's 3 things you want to talk about, or you want to include potentially in a motion, or 3 separate motions. One is, do you want to continue on? 2 is, do you want to continue with United Way in terms of overseeing that or partnering with them? And 3 was, there was a comment made about in a situation where you have an emergency natural disaster or something, for example, the 712 house that, that caught on fire, that it would waive, the matching funds or accelerate the help. So
Brian, just to clarify.
Yes.
Council wants to move ahead with this. Don't they have to refer to us to at least amend the agreement?
Yes, so
Around
the current agreement,
action.
yes, the current agreement has expired with the exception of the requirements for United Way to maintain some records. So we would need to have direction to prepare a new agreement
With your
reflecting
criteria,
any
whatever.
desires for changes in the program or how you'd like to approach that, as well as direction regarding the dollar amount that you'd like to utilize and the source, depending on what combination of those two, the general fund and local option sales tax fund monies you'd like to allocate towards this program.
Okay. I'm ready. You guys ready? I would move that we initiate a new round of grant funding for the 2019-2020 fiscal year, and that we direct staff to revamp the agreement with United Way of Story County, adding some qualifier about natural disaster as a exemption to the match requirement. And I would move that We initiate that new round of funding at the $250,000 level, 50,000 from the general fund and 200,000 from the local option sales tax fund.
Second.
Okay, move to second, discussion?
I have a question. You only mentioned natural disasters, also emergencies, such as any sort of emergency, right?
Sorry, David, you cut out.
Oh, too bad. You said natural disaster in your motion.
Or
to include emergency as well?
Sure.
It's like you're in a hurricane there, David, or-
Disaster.
Okay.
Disaster.
It's not going to make a difference. It's when you never give more than you in future years. Remember,
Okay.
don't give 5% of only 3%.
Was your question answered, David? I'm sorry.
I think so. Is emergency covered under this motion or not?
Are emergencies?
Emergencies, like the fire, hypothetically, yes, I guess I had that in mind.
Well, if you're writing a grant, I mean, it could have been for a past emergency, right? But once the money's expended, we're not going to be taking applications for emergency. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not really the same thing.
I suppose.
Can you comment, either Gene or Brian, on that in terms
Need
of
a definition, I think.
the practicality of the, because it was something was
Yeah,
brought up
'cause
in the staff report.
I like the idea, but if
You
it's
can't really include an emergency in a grant. I mean, that's
So the
unless you
intent
set aside money.
is the intent that there wouldn't be a match requirement if they are using the funds to remedy damage from a disaster or emergency
Yeah.
type situation.
right.
Which is, to Amber's point, in arrears, so to speak. In other words, it happened, and do they have to have a match in order to go ahead and apply for funds to, let's just use YSS as
Right.
fire.
So
Are they-
Well, and I guess so I'm just using Main Street as an example. We had a significant flood that happened to one of our Polk County homes. And we had actually discussed, trying to find grant opportunities, but it ended up that our insurance paid every single piece of what we lost. So we wouldn't even been eligible for grants anyway, because we would have been double dipping based on our insurance payout. So I'm not sure that it even applies in most cases.
My
For disasters
familiarity-
and things.
Well, my familiarity with emergency funding through grants comes from the Historic Resource Development Program grants that the state offers. And what they usually do is have a regular grant round, and then if there's money left from the regular grant round,
Right.
they open up an emergency funding round, because there are instances where there are disasters that occur, but they are outside the regular grant round unless there's a match that's already been developed and that the money can be applied for in the regular round.
Gene, you look puzzled or confused, so because you're gonna have to execute it. So do you have any questions or concerns on that?
I will wait to see what the contract says, and then if I have questions, I'll let you know. How's that?
Okay.
Does that seem difficult to implement?
For emergencies,
Mhm.
if we're doing it through a LOI process, I don't think we can schedule the emergency, so I'm not going to be cute, but I think that
Sure.
I understand what you're saying. But I would think that if they don't have insurance, I've got bigger concerns for that agency than
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's
for those kinds of things. But
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could amend the
I mean, we
motion
had
to take
talked
it
about
out.
the emergency in the original grant agreement, or the contract agreement, was that they would have to pay back the funds if they didn't use that facility for what it was going to be, unless there was an emergency. So for example, if we want to use YSS,
I see.
if they had used the money for 712 house and then there was a fire, they're no longer going to use that facility, so they would not have to pay back the funds as spelled out in the agreement between the city and United Way.
I
That's
see.
what I thought you were saying at first.
I see. No, that does make sense too. I would scratch that part from my motion. So the motion would just be to initiate a new round of capital improvement grant funding, $250,000 for the 2019-2020 fiscal year, partnering with United Way Story County.
And sources?
Oh yeah, 50,000 from the general fund, 200,000 from the local option sales tax fund.
Second.
All right. For discussion?
I guess I would just ask that, I think the reason this came up was that the allocation committee had mentioned that they were interested in something like this. And so if they, if they can make that clearer at some point down the road, then maybe that's something that we could consider. But given that we're having trouble interpreting exactly what it meant, I support the rephrasing of the motion.
All right. All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed or abstaining?
Nay.
Abstaining.
Okay, motion carried 4-1-1.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for coming, Gene. All right, move on to item 27. First passage of ordinance removing multifamily residential properties from the list of property types included in municipal code section 28.2141 that requires individual metering, individual water metering.
Move on first.
Second.
Do we have to have a hearing?
It's not published as a hearing required, so.
Okay.
All right, roll call?
Martin?
Aye.
Garten?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Edie Hanson?
Aye.
Corriere?
Aye.
Batchor?
Aye.
Okay, staff has requested waiving or suspending rules and passing on second and third in order to make it easier for the enforcement of that. But it's up to the council to decide and make a motion on that regard.
Move to waive the rules.
Second.
All right. Roll call?
Garten?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Edie Hanson?
Aye.
Corriere?
Aye.
Batchor?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Okay, entertain a motion on second passage.
Move on second.
Second.
Okay, roll call?
Garten? Nelson?
Aye.
Edie Hanson?
Aye.
Corriere?
Aye.
Batchor?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Garten?
Aye.
Entertain a motion on third passage.
Move on third?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Edie Hanson?
Aye.
Corriere?
Aye.
Batchor?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Garten?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 28, third passage and adoption of ordinance number 4376.
Move on third.
Second?
Roll call?
Corriere?
Aye.
Batchor?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Garten?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Edie Hanson?
Aye.
And third passage and adoption of ordinance number 4377.
Move on third.
Second?
Roll call?
Batchor?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Garten?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Edie Hanson?
Aye.
Corriere?
Aye.
Okay, disposition of communications to council. We have a number of them tonight. So. First item is a report from Ames Public Library from January 4th, 2019. Any,
That's just it. That's not,
pardon me?
that's just
FYI.
FYI, right?
Yeah, you can move to, would entertain a motion to accept the report as submitted.
So moved.
Second?
Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Number 2, memo from Planning and Housing Department, January 4th, regarding a request from Ben Jensen to allow a 6-foot fence in front yard of the property located at 4415 Lincoln Way.
I thought we already decided to not do anything with this.
Or this was the memo?
Or is this?
We
Who's the
referred it
memo?
to,
Yeah,
this
we
is the
did it
memo
for
that
a
was
memo.
requested.
Oh, okay.
So is there a motion to put on agenda or to deny the request or just to take no action?
Well, I had one question, and Steve, maybe you know the answer to this. Is there anything that would preclude Mr. Jensen from using shrubbery to achieve this goal? I was trying to find some way to achieve his goal of providing some kind of privacy.
Yeah.
The scope of this change is far-reaching, much more beyond his particular project, and that's why I'm hesitant to support it. I want to be helpful to him, but could shrubberies or something be utilized?
Yeah, I just don't, I'm not prepared to say, I don't know.
Okay.
We can work with planning though and get that answer for him. don't know if that was proposed or.
Well, given the scope of the changes and the impacts, I want to be cautious about having one project have a rippling effect on city code. And so I would move that we ask staff to tell Mr. Jensen that we are not inclined to move forward with his proposal.
Second.
In essence, denying his request for a text amendment.
Correct.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried.
And it may be, Steve, is your staff might be able to make some suggestions if there are some
Yeah,
other alternatives for achieving that goal.
Yep, good idea.
Okay, item 3, memo from Planning and Housing Department. This is from Paul Livingston regarding annexation options for the Champlin Lloyd Farm LLC and Southwest Growth Area.
I would move to refer this to staff for a memo.
Second.
Didn't we already?
Explain.
Okay,
We already got a memo.
We already got a memo.
This
It's
is-
not?
if I could, I did talk to Kelly.
This, yeah.
Just a bad information. I did talk to Kelly about this. He was not able to be here tonight, but it was his suggestion that council consider placing it on a future agenda, but only after there's clarity and direction on the status of the McKay property being annexed. So in other words, this would not move forward until McKay, because the point is it would affect
Yeah.
the overall annexation and the ratios as well too. And so that would be his suggestion. So it's not a matter of it not going to happen necessarily immediately, but the point is that it could if there's this. And apparently he's going to be also meeting with those property owners in the near future as well too on that. So it may be moving forward.
I withdraw my motion.
Okay. So is there a motion to place on a future agenda, but only after clarity on direction of McKay property?
Can we just like table it to a date unknown?
Just placing on a future agenda, it's date uncertain.
Okay, I would move that we place this on a future agenda, date uncertain.
Second.
So just make sure we're on the same page. Is there any downside with delay that we should be taking into account? And I don't know if there's anyone here that is able to speak to that, but I just want to be cognizant of unintended consequences. It doesn't matter, but I'd like to know. And we can speak to that. You know, Steve?
I don't believe there is.
Okay.
By the way, I don't think anything precludes them from moving ahead and requesting annexation.
Right.
They don't have to wait for a response from you. They can go ahead and start the process without you. But I think they're tied together. What happens in McKay may have affect your options on annexation.
Well, I certainly think it would be prudent for us to have an understanding of all the pieces on the chessboard.
Right.
Right. Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Item 4, email from Steve Bergeson, request for pre-annexation agreement similar to Resolution 13583 on December 30th, 2013 between City of Ames and the Jamie and Brian Frame property.
I'd move we get a memo on this from staff.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Item 5, email from Al Warren, request to finish bedrooms at 2334 Storm Street. They're put on hold during the temporary moratorium. Conversation with Councilman Martin this afternoon, he brought to my attention that we do have a June 6, 2018 staff memo, but it just never made it past that to going into an agenda item. So
We tabled it, and then I thought we decided in council comments that we were not going to pursue it because we couldn't pursue it without changing the ordinance, but I can't find that in my notes and I can't find it in minutes. So,
That's my recollection too, is that we we discussed it at council comments, but then I thought we'd asked to discuss it at a future time, but then it didn't come around again. Anyway, my notes also sort of failed to show what happened to it ultimately.
Okay.
I'm sympathetic with the Warren situation. They worked very hard to interface with city staff and follow the rules that we've provided for them. And because of procedural snafu, they get the short end of the stick. And I'm not comfortable with the city treating people who try to follow our rules that way. So I still would like to find some way to grant that request.
I thought we determined we couldn't grant that request without changing the ordinance.
Then we change the ordinance.
But that's all of the occupancy in all of the near campus neighborhoods, or maybe it was citywide in residential low density rentals.
You couldn't adjust the ordinance just to say people who were already in the process? Mark?
For some reason, it was broader.
I think
than-
you have to refer it to us if you want us to figure out how to
Yeah.
do it. I don't think we
Let's-
should talk about it today.
Well, then
It should go on the agenda then and
Yeah.
for topic
Then
discussion.
I would move that we refer this item to city staff to provide us with options,
And place on a future agenda.
placed on future agenda.
Second.
Some in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm sorry, did you say yeah, aye or nay, David? Sorry.
That was a nay.
Nay, okay. 5-1, motion passed. Item 6, letter from Fairway Stores requesting access to metered or reserved parking spaces during construction of a store at 619 Burnett.
Steve, is
Refer
this
that to us.
That's a memo?
Yep.
Or,
I think you need to refer it to us for a memo.
okay, move to refer to staff as a memo.
Second.
Do we, just asking, do we need a memo or can we just go ahead and
Just
decide
do
this
it,
tonight?
yeah.
It seems like a fairly straightforward request.
Agreed.
I'm just trying to find a way, if there's something that's controversial or an issue that we need to consider, then let us know, but I don't know.
Well,
I don't overthink it either.
We have to just put it on a future agenda.
Do we need to do
no
that?
memo.
That we can
You need to,
decide.
you can't act
We
on it.
can't decide
I
on
know
it.
it's straightforward because you have to decide whether
We
you,
just put it on a future.
it'll come out of the parking fund again if you make them pay or not pay.
Okay.
It's a little bit unusual.
Okay.
Well, we could skip the memo and just do
Please.
the,
Yeah, I'll withdraw that motion and move to add it to a future agenda.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Okay, council comments. Gloria, you want to start off tonight?
Welcome to the new year. I found out yesterday that I have been appointed chair of the University Communities Council for the National League of Cities. So I'm excited about that. And I would like to make a motion to follow up on the Campus and Community Commission report. And that motion is that I would move that staff and perhaps that's Steve, maybe that's Brian, I'm not sure. You can decide who that is. Contact Iowa State to discuss the potential to expand their principles of community to include the city in some way. And to investigate the potential to expand orientation efforts to better address student inclusion in the Ames community. And that's just a discussion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Anything else?
I think that's it.
David?
Yes, going back to consent agenda item number 5 on a change order, I would move to ask for a brief memo just explaining why we have such a large amount of change orders relative to the original contract order.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Anything else?
Nothing else from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
Well, one of our city council members tonight is having a birthday. Happy birthday, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Tim.
We won't sing for you. or-
Thank you.
Nothing further.
Chris?
Happy New Year. Looking forward to 2019.
Nothing for me?
Amber?
Nothing for me.
First of all, I want to thank Bronwyn publicly for serving as mayor pro tem last year and let people know publicly that Chris is going to serve as mayor pro tem this year. So thank you for that. And as everyone around the dais and probably people in the audience are aware, we're in the process of doing private fundraising for the Healthy Life Center, and they're still working on that. And so they're still looking for people to consider investing in that very worthwhile project. And just as a reminder, with Astromine Council, we have an important meeting on the 31st. We'll have an update of a joint session with the supervisors, Mayor of the Board, and council. It's open meeting, and that starts at 7 o'clock. So I'll remind you once again, but that's an important meeting. It's a Thursday night. Want to make sure that we are there and see what the next steps are going to be. So with that, favorite motion of the night,
Move to adjourn?
we are adjourned.